I normally use Zoom for my sins, but it's probably pretty much same setup.
Yeah, we can see them there.
And put it on
there we go.
loud. Yeah,
Brilliant.
that's coming through loud and clear. Okay,
that's perfect.
And
yeah, let's move on back and over.
Okay. Right. Okay, that's fine.
That's great.
Let's stop sharing here now.
Brilliant.
Stop sharing. Okay.
Perfect. We'll be ready to kick off, I suppose, at around 2 or maybe a minute or 2 past.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's great, Kevin.
Just one of those questions I sent you, Gavin. There, you can probably ignore it there on the welfare indicators because I'm going to cover it in slides. So
sure. Great.
One less for you to ask.
That's one. We'll be gentle. We'll be gentle.
Well, it'd be difficult if I couldn't answer my own questions. That'd be a bit embarrassing.
Well, we thought of a few more.
Oh no.
No, that's brilliant. No, thanks for that, Kevin. That's great.
I'm
gonna come off and hide because Roshan's gonna chair today, so I'm gonna slip away into the background.
Very good. Okay.
Thanks in advance, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Brilliant.
Perfect. We'll give it 10 minutes so, and we'll be ready to kick off then. Get everyone joined. Yeah. That okay?
That's grand. Shall I come back to you in a few minutes there? So.
Yeah, whenever you're ready. For around 2 o'clock. Perfect. 2 o'clock. Thanks,
okay.
Kevin.
Thanks, Roisin.
Hi everyone. We'll just give it another minute to let people join and then we'll begin. Perfect. So I think we'll kick off. So hi everyone and welcome to day 2 of Food Safety Week. Today we are delighted to welcome Kevin Brennan from Teagasc to speak on meat quality and animal welfare. Many of you may know Kevin, but for those of you who are not familiar with him, Kevin is a food safety and quality specialist at Teagasc. He is responsible for the development and delivery of national training and consultancy programs in food safety, quality and welfare. After the presentation, we'll open the floor to any questions and comments that you may have. So with that, Kevin, I'll let you take over whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Roisin. Okay, I'll just share my screen here now. Everybody see that? Can you see that, Roisin?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I'll get going. So, well, first of all, thanks for the invite to our meets and Dumbia Group to make this presentation. As Roisin said, yeah, my name is Kevin Brennan. I work for the agricultural food advisory body called Teagasc. This presentation is very much focused on the influence of animal welfare on meat quality and safety. And as Roisin said, I welcome any questions at the end of the presentation. So you're all very welcome. And just to give you a quick overview of the presentation, I'm going to touch briefly on animal welfare and the management system around animal welfare. We'll take a look at the effect of stressed animals and poor welfare on meat quality, and have a look at an overview of animal lairaging to the point of slaughter and death, so to the point of stunning. So just to kick it off, really, these days we very much talk about animal welfare in the context of welfare management, and there's really just 4 key areas to this, as I would see it. There's your foundation, I suppose, of this system, of the model, which is your welfare prerequisites. And that very much would look at the lairage, the structure, the layout of lairage, your equipment, and the design of all of that. So that's really your equipment, your structure, and so on. It's a very, very important aspect of it. The process controls then really is your SOPs, so your animal welfare SOPs, how you do your planning, your doing, your checking, your acting. Okay, and central to all of this then is your welfare personnel. And then the producer controls then is really is what happens at farm level and your controls and checks on that. And by that, you're hopefully looking at welfare indicators. And there's an onus these days then of feeding back those welfare indicators back to the producer and acting on those findings. And then a key part of the structure then is the management procedures. So this is your input for management in terms of training, resources, and a very important term there called welfare culture. Okay, so the culture of staff in the business in relation to animal welfare. So just to put a structure behind all these systems, I think is useful, and that's a suggested structure. So the more layers, obviously, that you have in a system, the better the system is at blocking certain aspects. So in this case, we're looking at blocking the negative components of animal welfare. So the more systems, the more layers you have in place. Now, They have to be useful layers, of course, but the more layers you have in place, potentially the better the system is. Just in this context, there is a very detailed standard that has been published by Chagas. It's the Chagas standard for animal welfare at time of slaughter. It's freely available on the internet there, so if you have any time, feel free to download that and have a closer look. It goes into a lot more detail and what I'm going to cover today. Okay, I remember doing a course many years ago, and I managed to forget, I think, 99% of the course. But one thing that stuck out in my mind was a quote by this guy, a guy called Peter Drucker, and he's an Austrian-American management consultant. And he came up with this very useful line, which sort of stuck with me from then till now, and that's culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can have all the systems in place, you can have all the procedures in place, but if you don't have a good culture and a good employee culture in place, then everything else will fall down. And this very much applies to animal welfare. So you need to have a good animal welfare culture in place. And when we say culture, we're talking about mindset, attitude, approach, and staff awareness of animal welfare. So taking this analogy as an example, if everybody in the boat is not rowing in the same way, and bear in mind in most companies and most businesses, you have varying sets of individuals with varying ideas, but they need to pull and row in the one direction, otherwise the system will fail. So in this case, the boat is going to sink, unfortunately, if they don't pull in the right direction. So animal welfare culture and general awareness, general pulling in the right direction is vitally important. Okay, I'm going to look now at meat and quality and the influence of, and which is the core discussion point today, the influence of poor welfare practice on meat quality. So if you take the definition of quality, it's defined, and this is a general definition, it's defined as fit for purpose. So that's a very general definition. As I say, it would cover fit for purpose possibly during manufacture, and also fit for purpose at point of sale, so point of consumer sale. And if you take the meat quality component of that, there's 4 parts of that really. There's your physical attributes, your chemical nutrition attributes, the micro attributes, and the sensory component of it. And you can break those down further into, on the physical side, maybe marbling, water holding capacity, on a chemical nutrition, your proteins, your minerals, your fats, your moisture, pH, which is important. And the micro part then will cover your shelf life and the general safety components of the meat. And then when you're getting into sensory, you're looking at color, smell, flavor, tenderness. So these are all very important attributes from a consumer point of view. And the interesting thing here is much of these are heavily influenced by animal welfare practice. So for example, water holding capacity, your pH, the bacterial levels, your shelf life, and tenderness and flavor and color and smell to a certain degree. So they're all heavily influenced by animal welfare practice. And if we go right back to the start of this whole equation and look at farm practice, and I just want to take this analogy of a sugar hourglass. So hopefully at the start, back in the farms, this glass of sugar is full. And when I refer to sugar, I'm talking about the sugar content in the muscle tissue of these animals, which is also called glycogen. And glycogen is made up of all these little small glucose molecules, which are all bolted together and stuck together. But these give the animals their energy, their drive in life, and so on. But when they're stressed, these particular components are used up and used up very quickly. So good welfare really starts on the farm. Okay. And the idea from here on in is to try and maintain this hourglass as full as possible. Each time that chips away, we're losing glycogen, valuable glycogen and glucose. And I'll show you the importance of this now shortly. Okay, so each step then, or each stress step from an animal welfare point of view, will chip away at these sugar levels. And each time that happens, may be caused by stress or other factors that will lead to financial and welfare cost. Okay, I'll come back to the discussion around this again shortly. So farm practice then. Now, I just want to stress here, some of these photographs are obviously not taken in Ireland, but they are real life situations. But what I want you to do as an exercise, and maybe to try and keep you half awake, is as we go through these slides and as we see these photographs, make your own notes of any welfare issues that you might come across for discussion, maybe at the end of the presentation. We'll give you some bonus marks if you can spot the welfare issues. Some of them are very obvious and some not. So welfare starts obviously on the farm, and a couple of potential issues here just to start off with. Here we have a border collie. He's taking a shortcut down on the back of a line of sheep. There's a blockage down here at the end, and this guy obviously is a bit over amorous with his feet. That's a horn there, by the way. Okay, and then transport. Again, we're looking at each step now that could possibly chip away at this hourglass full of sugar. So again, not necessarily an Irish photograph, but this photograph was taken by a colleague of mine in the EU. So transport comes in various forms and shapes. Again, animals arriving at lairage, lots of issues here. You might make a note of these. The key one I wanted to point out is these animals are being forcefully removed from the transport, the transporter here in this case, and obviously that can come in all shapes of forms. So eventually these animals probably will be nearly beaten out of this transporter. So lots of issues here that will again chip away at this hourglass of sugar. Okay, so the animals then they arrive in on site, they're in the lairage, and one of your requirements then as a welfare officer or welfare personnel is to look at welfare indicators. And when we talk about welfare indicators, we're talking about pre and post slaughter indicators. Now, an organisation called EFSA, which is European Food Safety Authority, and they have an interest in animal welfare from the food safety point of view. They've come up with this concept of 4 key areas for looking at welfare indicators. So, for example, good feeding, good housing, good health, and appropriate behaviour. If you divide those down further, they're looking at no injuries, no disease, absence of hunger, absence of prolonged thirst, and so on. Thermal comfort there mentioned as well. And then post-slaughter indicators then could include aspects such as rejects, condemnations, bruising, abscess, fractures, swelling, joint lesions, lung pathologies, internal hepatocytes, and so on. So all of these, and gathering data and trending all of these is useful for that purpose, but also for providing feedback to producers. And this is very much now being adapted and adopted into current welfare standards, national standards, the Board B Quality Assurance Schemes, for example, and other retail standards will address these aspects as well. So more of an onus on looking at indicators and trying to feed that back to the producer to try and improve, if need be, on those issues. Okay, so then using the welfare indicators in the abattoir, in this case bruising, making a note of that. In poultry, foot pad dermatitis can be an issue, also known as bullman foot, and you'll see variations of that from mild to severe. So again, recording that and feeding that back to the producer would be a requirement there in that case. The effects on the meat, then quality can be fairly severe. So in this case, pork, PSE, pale soft exudate, which is very soft, pale white pork, or dark cutting in beef and lamb. And then just some of the science behind this, and this is where I'm getting to the value of pH and the value of this sugar hourglass. So when the animal's alive, the sugar is converted to energy and also to carbon dioxide and water. But when the animal is dead, it's converted to lactic acid. And it's this lactic acid that's important. So the more sugar, the more lactic acid that's produced. And this lactic acid then has an effect on reducing the pH of the meat. So When the animal's alive, your pH is around 7, 7.4. And then when the animal is dead and this sugar is used up, the sugar is converted to lactic acid, and that reduces the pH. And the optimal pH is down around 5.7 or less, and that's regarded as the optimal pH for good meat quality. So that's what you're trying to target. If it's above that, then you're going to get issues in the meat. So we're looking for this nice even curve where you start off with your neutral pH of around 7, and then it's dropping down over a period of about 24 hours down to around 5.7 or slightly below that. Okay. So that's your sort of regarded as your normal rate of pH fall. So when the sugar levels is high and you get that normal level of pH fall, you end up with normal meat, as I say. And if it's too low, as in this case, you're going to end up with issues with the meat. So dark meat, tender meat, on the pig side, PSE, and so on. The other issue as well here, and this is the safety one, is that pH, the lower the pH is, the more of a factor in inhibiting bacterial growth. So the more acidic the product is, the less bacteria will grow in the product. So that's where the safety aspects come into play. Bacteria grow quite happily at a neutral pH, but when it drops down, they're less happy. Okay, so the ultimate effect then is on the eating quality and the appearance of the meat. So as I mentioned previously, attributes such as your water holding capacity, your shelf life from the safety point of view, and tenderness and color will be influenced by that initial drop in pH, which is ultimately related to the sugar content of the muscle tissue. So that's why the minimizing the stress on animals is hugely important from a quality point of view. Now we've all the legal aspects as well, which I'm not touching on, and so on. But from a quality point of view, it's vital that the animals are handled properly from start to finish. Okay, now it would be remiss of me not to mention Article 13 of on the function of the EU and this whole topic of sentience. So that the member state, and this is Article 13, the member state shall, since animals are sentient beings, pay full regard to the welfare of animals. That's important. And this has led to several improvements in animal welfare. For example, enriched poultry cages, which is the photograph here. So they're nice, big, bright cages now. They used to be more confined. Poultry had less room to move around. There's more scratching areas in these, trying to mimic the natural environment, and they're generally that bit better for poultry. That was one of the outcomes. And it's moves afoot at the moment to try and minimize pig farrowing crates. So this is where you confine the sow to a very small area, whilst the pigs are being reared up to the point of weaning at about 28 days. So this moves afoot now to try and ban that and move to a more welfare-friendly aspect. That's just two examples. Now, sentience, what does it mean? So it really means that animals have this level of awareness, cognitive ability, they have feelings, they have this ability to evaluate others, mood evaluation. Horses, for example, can sense your heartbeat from as far away as 4 feet. So if you're in a bad mood, a horse will pick it up. I'm sure other animals are in the same case. They have the ability to remember their own actions, assess risks and benefits, and the ability to be affected positively or negatively by their actions or other people's actions as it may happen. So examples then, these two animals, whilst they have their own, sheep has his own flock of sheep, the horse has his own his other horses in the herd as well. The two of these guys have palled up. Not sure why, but they have become quite good pals. Okay. Do animals mourn death? Again, on sentience, yes, they do. If you look at geese, they tend to pair up for life. In this case, the gander, the male goose, was killed by a fox, and the resultant partner mourned the dead for several weeks, so wouldn't eat and so on for several weeks. So examples of mourning of death and in that. They can be influenced, their mood can be influenced. So these virtual reality headsets, an experiment that was carried out on cattle in in lairage. So they're showing these cattle VR headsets of rich green pastures, and it actually improved their outputs. So it improved their milk outputs. These are dairy cattle, I think. So they can be influenced in terms of mood. Learned association. In some parts of the world, they've trained rats to sniff out and detect mines. So the rat goes out, finds the mine, and comes back and gets a treat. Okay. So, and again, learned behavior in poultry. This poultry here is actually not dead, but is actually having a dust bath. And it knows by having a dust bath that the dust will remove any external parasites on the bird by desiccation. So something that is learned over time. This guy here, you can't really make it out here, but he's found a patch of food and he's trying to call his other mates there. This cockerel is calling the other flock of hens over to a nice, I think it was a worm, an earthworm there, and so they are sensitive to the feelings of other birds as well in this case, and again another example of sentience. And social and curious animals, pigs, a very good example of that. Really curious social animals and highly intelligent. Okay, I suppose one thing about a herd of horses or a herd of cows, dairy cows in particular, it's not necessarily the strongest member of the herd that leads the herd, but it could be the oldest. It could be the oldest member of the herd that has the most experience. So, for example, cows, sometimes the oldest member of the herd who knows where the best patches of grass are, she will become the leader or the dominant person of the herd, dominant member of the herd. And I thought this was interesting, this quote here, that humans don't often follow that particular trait. So sometimes the dumbest can lead the human herd in some cases. But that doesn't happen in animals. Okay, so I mentioned the welfare model and what welfare indicators that you need to be monitoring, these welfare indicators, particularly in lairage and also post slaughter. And just some of the things to keep an eye out on, I suppose, from a lairage point of view. One of the common issues with cattle in particular and sheep as well, sometimes pigs, is lameness. So lameness issues with the hoof. So you can see here there's an abscess in this hoof there. Fairly obvious when an animal is lame, they're going to lift the leg and show lameness, and there's different grades of lameness. This is an example of a horse where there's a puncture wound just in the cornea of the outer hoof of the horse, and an infection has got in here. Similar things happen in cattle and in sheep, maybe puncture wounds or bits of stones, bits of dirt gets into the hoof and causes an infection, and can cause severe lameness. Horn cattle, obvious issues there, broken horn in this case. An animal here with an obvious abscess which has been lanced, so a fairly severe infection there. You might be looking back as the cause of that, why that happened, and then obviously how it was treated afterwards, and then withdrawal periods for the treatment. Prolapses then, prolapse in sheep, in a cow here. Probably unlikely to see this. This is an inguinal hernia in a horse, and that's the intestine there starting to protrude. That's a fairly immediate veterinary intervention case. In cattle, again, there's systems for grading those. This animal here is obvious sign of bloat. The tail biting in pigs, fairly bad case there. And issues here with layers in poultry, so defeathering or plucking. Now this is probably not such an issue these days with the advent of the enriched cages that I mentioned previously, but it used to be an issue. So just to be aware of those welfare issues and to have a system in place for trying to track those down and record those, trend those, and repeat them back and report them back to the producer. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the 5 freedoms of animal welfare, so I'm just going to recap on this, but it's essentially a well-established evidence-based framework that captures the key elements of animal welfare in one model. And what they are is 1, freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. So a useful set of evidence-based requirements there that can capture animal welfare in one model. And then when assessing overall welfare, some of the key questions, and this will apply to farm, to on-farm, and to lairage situations, and it's very much animal focused. So are animals properly fed, watered? So water is a key requirement. That's a prerequisite requirement in lairage. If animals are kept overnight for long periods of time, they should be fed. Are the animals properly housed, lairaged? So you're back to your lairage design, your prerequisites again. Are they healthy? Are they happy? Now, this is a sort of maybe an additional one here where you're looking at positive emotional state and possibly linked to what we call a sixth freedom, which is a freedom to undergo positive experiences. Now, there's been some progress on this area on farms in particular. So, for example, housing pigs on straw bedding, trying to resemble their natural foraging behavior. So they'll root around in the straw bedding. These scratching posts for cattle, they're quite common now on farms. Work very well for humans as well, but don't say I said that. And then providing, say, broilers in this case with bales of straw. So again, it mimics their natural foraging environment. They'll pick at it, they'll roost on it, and so on. So again, these are just some recent developments. Well, scratch the scratch post is not recent, but there is a focus, as I say, on trying to provide these positive experiences on farms. And again, you could try and look at some of these some concepts like these in lairage, but the basic requirements in lairage will apply that the animals are fed if necessary and watered if necessary, and the good design, good layout of lairage. Okay, I always say to people when we're talking about welfare is stand back and observe. And you may have heard of this particular point mentioned yesterday in your presentation from Temple Grandin. Visual thinkers, I think she mentioned it. But by the time I finish talking about this, you should be seeing a different picture on this particular slide. So when you look at it initially, you'll probably see two old devils looking at each other, eyeing each other up. But eventually you should see two people, one playing the banjo and one carrying a basket of something on her head. So the point here is sometimes when you stand back and observe for a while, you see different things. And one of the, which was a good point yesterday in your presentation from Temple Grandin, was reflections from the sun at various times in the day. Now you might, if you looked at that in the morning, you might not necessarily see that. So your angry spider might not be there in the morning, but maybe there in the afternoon. So sometimes when you stand back and observe for a while, you see different things. Positive emotional state, again, nothing like a good haircut for a sheep on a hot summer's day. How do you recognize positive emotional state? Well, just simply look at the animal. Look at the general appearance of the animal. Positive emotional state in poultry. One thing that poultry love to do when they roost is roost at the highest level possible. Again, they're predated animals. They're trying to escape from the nasty fox and pine martens of the world and minks of the world. So they go to the highest point that they can find. If they're confined in a cage, then that's going to be an issue for those birds. It took me a while when I looked at this photograph first to figure out what was going on, but I decided that this is my theory anyway, that the chicken, it's a Polish chicken. This chicken is actually scratching the back of this sheep. So the sheep is quite happy. And whilst the back of the sheep then is a nice warm cozy area for the chicken, so the chicken is actually going to sleep on the back of the sheep. So the two of them are mutually benefiting from their companionship. That's my theory anyway, I could be wrong. Okay, so now again we're moving down along the process, and this is the animal welfare process, I suppose, and animal transport. And I'm not going to go into huge detail on this, but just to state that this is taken from Annex 1 of Chapter 1 of the 1099/2009 regulations, EU regulation. So no animals shall be transported unless it is fit for the intended journey, and all animals should be transported in conditions guaranteed not to cause them injury or unnecessary suffering. That's a key requirement. That's a legal requirement. And again, we're trying to keep that hourglass as full as possible. But once you put animals into transport, there will be some effect. This is a photograph I sort of robbed off a colleague of mine. It's actually an Irish-based one, but obviously issues here in transport. So these animals ended up in a fairly uncompromising position. Now, it turned out that they weren't actually injured, that they walked off the truck, but there would have been a fair chipping away at their sugar hourglass in that transport. Also look at the ramp itself. Take note of that. Take note of the grips here as well, and the space between the grips. Casualty animals. So if animals come in with broken legs or whatever it is, what do you do? What's in your procedure? Who do you call? Unloading and loading, the ramps themselves, there's some key requirements for those. So in terms of the slope of the ramps, 26.5 is recommended for sheep and cattle, 20 for calves and pigs, and if steeper than 10 should be fitted with foot battens, so the animals don't slip whilst going down the ramp. And the positioning of the foot battens is important, so the distance between them is important. Okay, a couple of more examples of transport. Again, take note of these. These animals have to get off that truck somehow. Not going to be easy. Take note of this one, the ramp angle and possible gaps here at the side of the truck. Offloading of sheep. The one that really strikes me here is this obstruction that's sticking out here. I'd be looking closely at that and what's at the back of that. Loading sheep, again, issues here. Where's the side ramps? Lots of potential here for injury. Offloading sheep, again, keep an eye on the slope of that, the battens in between, any issues with that. Gaps on the ramp itself, the distance between the battens here. So plenty of potential issues there. Offloading of ducts. Now, I wouldn't like to be the ducts on the bottom of this. Again, this is not something you're going to see too often, but just I suppose is exaggerating the point. Again, has to be done in a proper fashion. Okay, so importance then of stock personnel. Now, this was touched a bit on yesterday, so I'm going to recap a little bit on this. But so your stock men, your stock women, I don't know which is the correct term. Key importance this whole process. As I mentioned, the problem is that for every step of the process from farm to death of the animal, there's a negative impact on animal welfare. So the stock person then is recognized as an essential part of that. So awareness of animal movement, animal behavior, knowledge of the flight zones, how to make use of the flight zones, all very important. Layout yourself. Again, this is covered in Annex 2 of regulations in terms of structure and layout. Has to be covered from weather, be well ventilated. Surfaces non-slip and cleanable, drinking points in all pens and clean, and feed racks if kept overnight. Okay, so feed racks and adequate amount of feed. So they shouldn't be empty if kept overnight. Layerage, detention pens must be available, plans for fractious, dangerous stock, and stock are sensitive to noise. And this was also highlighted yesterday. So as prey animals, these animals obviously make good use of their hearing to assess different situations. And their hearing is really sensitive, so they can hear way more than we can. Our hearing range is around 20 hertz in this region, whereas the likes of cattle, sheep, you're looking at a much wider range in terms of hertz. So they can hear far more than we can. So anything that can be any sort of noises that are sharp, loud banging noises will agitate these animals. And this is also reflected in the regulations 1099/2009 Annex 2. So layer facilities shall be designed and constructed to minimize the risk of injuries to animals and the occurrence of sudden noises. So that's a legal requirement to minimize noise. Again, one of the common sources of noise is high-powered hoses. You could have These can come in you have power hoses and various grades of powerness in these, but they will make noise, and that can be an issue for animals. Now, movement of animals in lairage. Again, this is a fairly exaggerated example, but you have huge contrast here. You have a dark enclosure here. This will naturally cause balking of animals. They're not going to want to go into this area too handily. Likewise here, we talked about the scary spider yesterday. So you have a fairly bright area here, dark here. This will cause balking from an animal point of view as well. This looks like a dead end, even though there is a corner here. So again, that will cause balking of animals. Animals have a very acute sense of smell. So if there's urine or feces left in the lairage or in the raceway, that will possibly cause balking as well. And avoid lairage traps. So anything that could cause an animal's leg to get caught, its head to get caught, open drains, open holes in walls, gaps between the pen and the outer walkway where an animal could stick their leg in and get caught. These all can cause issues in lairage. Sharp edges on some of the metalwork, again, to be avoided. Lairage ventilation. Something that probably doesn't get discussed that often, but again, very important. And we're fortunate in Ireland that we have a very temperate climate. We don't have too much extremes of either of cold or hot, so we're lucky that way. But again, if you have a very enclosed lairage, you might need to keep an eye on temperature, humidity, and ammonia in some cases. So if you're looking at maybe say sheep lairages where there's feces and urine that goes down between slats and it is stored there for a while, there could be possible ammonia issues, but that should be checked as well. And flow rates through the lairage is important. Or air flow rates, I should say. Light is important, hugely important. So animals, as we know, prefer to move from dark to bright areas. Can be used to attract animals by illuminating the area ahead. Now, an interesting discussion yesterday was that of LED lighting. So maybe that's something that could be looked at. But I'd say if the lighting is of good standard, good quality lighting, that might be avoided. You might need to illuminate the whole chute to avoid reflections if that's required. Cattle can see 3 body lengths up the chute, and if they can't, they're likely to balk. Like in this case here, this animal wants to return back to where he came from. You're well aware then of the use of animal behavior, the point of balance in animals, and the idea of a curved chute, so the animal thinks he's going back to where he came from to try and move animals that bit quicker. So it's a well-established concept now at this stage. Goads, again, this was touched on yesterday, but there is a move at the moment to try and minimize or eliminate electric goads or electric podders. In particular, retailers have applied a lot of pressure here to try and reduce the use of these items. And there is strict legal use requirements on these. So if you look at Annex 3 of the legislation, 1099 legislation, goads can only be used as a last resort, and their use monitored to evaluate welfare. Okay, so you're only looking at adult pigs and cattle, and only if and their use has to be monitored carefully. Flooring and slipping, then again in 1099, this is seen as a cause of agitation and panic for animals. So there has to be certain design in relation to flooring. The key thing, non-slip. Okay. So flooring does wear down over time, but can be regrooved. So diamond-shaped pattern there, and this pattern here, this deep square pattern is recommended for cattle. So 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters, and about 2.5 centimeters deep. Cattle, if they can at all, if you get a chance, again, this is a live case, but not necessarily Ireland. They will try and escape, and I have come across this more times than often, and I had a few very close misses. So cattle, if they get an opportunity, they will try and jump out or try and escape from a race or from lairage or from a stun box, whichever they can. So beware of that. And you need to start thinking about, if that does happen, designing the escape routes. So how can the animals be returned safely back to lairage? And how can the handlers or the operatives in those areas be safely managed as well? So there's a health and safety aspect of it there as well. Okay, I'm just gonna getting towards the end of this now, and I just want to summarize really on a couple of things which again will affect the welfare of animals and this hourglass of sugar. So stunning and stunning techniques. I'm not going to get into great detail on this, but needless to say, the key things here are, there's two important words here: unconsciousness and insensibility. So the animal must be unconscious and insensible after stunning. Otherwise, you're getting into severe welfare issues, and that sugar will be rapidly depleted. Now, this guy could be employed in any abattoir. He's a very, very effective stunning technique. I don't know how quick it took him to do that, but it looks fairly effective. So consciousness then of an animal is essentially his ability to feel emotions and control its voluntary mobility. And sensibility then is its ability to feel pain. So we're looking at trying to render an animal unconscious, so it loses its natural standing position, is not awake, and does not show signs of positive or negative emotions, such as fear or excitement. And then its sensitivity, when it shows no reflexes or reaction to stimuli or such as sound, odor, light, or physical contact. Okay, so that's what you're aiming at. And also, just on that point, EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, has some useful, very useful traffic light systems and guidelines in this area, which are useful to download and incorporate into your SOPs. Stun box design, obviously, lots of issues here. You can point them out yourselves. They're fairly obvious. This animal, not well restrained, starting to turn back, and needless to say, huge issues here on health and safety. Not surprised there's a bandage in that hand. Okay. So summary in relation to stunning, the operative must know these: that the animal, when animal is stunned, it must collapse, no rhythmic breathing, fixed dilated pupil, no corneal reflex, jaw relaxed, tongue hanging out, reflex kicking can't be severe initially. And there are some of the key signs, some of the key indicators then of proper stunning. So rubbish in equals rubbish out. That's a well-known term, and it applies very much in any food premises. So even if you're not at all concerned with welfare, which I'm sure you're not, I'm sure you all are, it's a legal requirement, etc., and you're dealing with sentient animals. But even if you weren't, you cannot produce a consistent quality product from an animal that has been stressed, injured, or treated inhumanely. So to improve the quality of the product, you must improve welfare. So, and then that means better practice from start to finish. Okay, so completing here now. Hourglass empty at the end of all that? Hopefully not. So hopefully you have a good bit of sugar left. Otherwise, the quality of your final product will be affected. Okay, that's really it from myself. Just like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully it's provoked some thought. You got your thinking hats on at this point. And again, just like to thank Dunbee, the Dawn Group, for their invite to this, and thank you for your attention again. Okay.
Great, thanks very much, Kevin. That was great. I think we can all agree that contained, I suppose, a good refresher on animal welfare and how, I suppose, it is the main deciding factor on the quality of the product that we produce at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll open up the floor now to any questions that anyone might have or any comments.
No difficult questions now.
Roshan, I've got one, if I might kick off for Kevin.
Okay,
Kevin, thank you for that. That was brilliant. That was just an excellent real tour de force through all those factors that are going to affect meat quality and all the things that we've got to look out for, etc. Particularly interested around, well, there's so many bits, but you know, one bit you mentioned, I think right at the start, one of the fundamentals about producer controls.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose it's a question here, and you talked about lame animals, etc., and you know, fitness to travel. Just interested to see what your thoughts are around, you know, do farmers need some sort of specific animal welfare training, something in that area? And if so, how might we look at that? What might need to be in it, and how do we do it? Big question.
Oh God, that's a complex
Simple
one,
one.
yeah. And
Sorry.
a bit of politics in there as well. I think very good question. I think definitely, well, generally farmers are very good at treating animals, and I think they're pretty familiar with the general concepts of animal welfare, because it's their livelihood at the end of the day. But certainly, I think it'd be useful for some basic welfare communications to farmers. So maybe key points on handling animals. You mentioned fitness to travel. It's a legal requirement that animals can't go onto a transporter unless they can walk onto it unaided. So maybe communicating key points around that would be useful. But I think generally, yeah, my sort of summary answer would be that some basic communications, some basic training to farmers would be useful. Now, if they wanted more advanced animal welfare training, that's a possibility as well. And maybe that can be incorporated into their own training, their own education on agricultural courses and so on. But certainly basic communication on welfare. And also when you're looking at welfare indicators in the lairage, and also that's pre and post and post slaughter. I think feeding back those to farmers and the findings from that could influence as well what training and what communications are required afterwards. And that now is an important component of standards, of quality assurance standards, like the Board BA Quality Assurance Scheme, for example. So there's a whole raft of work there, I think, that could be done. I think it's hugely important, because welfare, as I mentioned, this whole hourglass of full sugar starts on the farm. It starts with the producer, so it's really important.
No, that's excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's certainly something that, as a business, that we try and feed that information back. But
yeah,
it's probably quite a bigger picture as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Farmers in. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Thanks. It's a great answer.
Yeah, John, if you want to work away, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Roisin, and thanks very much, Kevin. I have a quick question for you, Kevin, and it's something maybe people on the call know, or you know yourself. Rest periods in lairages from when animals come in prior to going up the race. You hear there's kind of different. Is that something that's happened? Is that a case by case basis, or is there a kind of set time, or what's the set rule for that? Because I know we bring excitable animals in, and if they're excitable and maybe a bit causing bother, the ladies will try and get them killed quickly. But what's the kind of rule of thumb, or what should we be working to?
Well, it's probably case by case, and I think the animal welfare officer and the staff down there probably will be able to measure this probably better than most. But if animals are obviously stressed, it's probably not a good idea to leave them there too long, and maybe they should be slaughtered maybe first or more quickly than others. There is a rule of thumb that stressed animals, if you want to and say, assuming that the glucose levels for stressed animals have been completely depleted and they're really stressed out, that say for cattle, they need something like 60 hours of rest before they fully recuperate and get back to where they started from. I think for sheep and pigs, it's slightly less, maybe 24 hours or 36 hours. Now, obviously, you won't have that capability in lairage to apply that, but so it's probably on a case by case basis. And if you're seeing really stressed animals or cases of animals getting stressed, you really need to treat the cause of that stress, or those animals will have to be slaughtered fairly quickly.
Yeah, it probably just goes to show how important the training is for and having good experienced stockmen down in the lairage who are able to tell, what's going on and what's the best way to handle it.
That's the key thing. There's good stockmen and women down there that visually are able to assess animals, look at animals, assess stress in animals very quickly. That's really important.
Thanks for that, Kevin. That's great.
Thanks
for the presentation.
Anyone else have anything that they would like to ask? I suppose I have
I
a
think
quick one for-
Rita has her hand raised here, but she I think it's physically raised. She has a not so Rita has a question to ask here as well.
Is that because she was going to sleep? I wonder.
Okay, John, thank you for sharing that. It just happens that he's across the table from me. And Kevin, of course, I'm not gone to sleep when I'm listening to your dulcet tones, giving that lecture. Just a couple of things, Kevin. I thought that the whole, the positive attributes of, what to look for from a positive point of view in good animal welfare. I thought that's, a really important thing that maybe we sort of look, which is our job as well, for the bad things. But then what you're just saying about happy, content animals in our lairage, I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, no, that's I'm glad you raised that there, because I think there's a lot of work being done at farm level in this area. As I mentioned, the back scratching and bedding for pigs and so on, and for poultry now, even incorporating trees into the poultry environment where they can clamber up the tree and perch. Really good for their mental outlook and their overall demeanor. But if you could take some of those aspects where
capture,
practical,
the positive type of things. And
Yeah,
the other thing, just on the new, we'll say the new standard for Board B, as you refer to yourself, where there's a very, very big part of that now, which is incorporating our communication back with our suppliers. So it's closing the loop,
Absolutely,
I think
that's an important gap that you've addressed. Yeah.
No, that was all I wanted to say.
Thanks for
Thank
that,
you,
Rita.
Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you.
and I think Brian, if you want to fire ahead.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Brian.
Thanks for that. Very, very interesting and informative. I just kind of have one question, and it's interesting to see how much how better the hearing is on sheep and pigs and cattle than humans. And over the last 15 or 20 years, I've heard the debate on music in the lairage many times: turn it on, turn it off, rock and roll, opera, this, that, and the other, and never heard a conclusive a view as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I was just wondering if you had an opinion or any evidence as to whether that's a positive or a negative.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about this the other day, because I was thinking what could make animals happier in lairage, and I have been in some sites and they have been playing nice, quiet background music. Now, it wasn't any sort of any heavy metal stuff or anything like that now, but sort of what you call, maybe a bit of Beethoven or something maybe in the background. But and in those lairages, I didn't see any negative effects. Actually, the lairages were well designed, and the animals were quiet or contented. There was I could see no heavy vocalizations or nothing that would indicate that the animals were stressed out. Now, I don't know, is to get the evidence that background music in those cases were, or possibly was, contributing to a quieter lairage environment and maybe making those animals happier. Is to get that evidence, I think, is the difficult part. But certainly I have seen no contradictory evidence to show that playing nice quiet background music would cause any stress issues to animals. Now, it might stress out the humans listening to Beethoven all day, I don't know, but I haven't seen any contradictory evidence, and there's probably not much published evidence on that either. So that's possibly a research project for the future.
No problem. Thanks for that.
Yeah, Gavin.
Roisin? Yeah, thanks. Just Kevin, if I could just ask you another question to see what your thoughts are on this. Brian's talked about music and obviously noise, and you mentioned noise very well in the presentation, and that's a huge area. But obviously the other massive thing is visual perception of cattle and sheep. One thing we're sort of quite interested in and looking at doing different things. Quite a few of our stun boxes, we've put green-blue horizons in the front of it to bring animals in, and that seems to have had quite a positive effect.
Yeah.
Just wondering on thoughts on colours in general. Obviously their colours are more restricted than humans, but they do see in colour. It just broadly thinking about you know, a lot of lairages are basically whatever colour the concrete is. Would there be something there in terms of, you know, making animals, we're talking about this, the sixth freedom, you know, positive emotional state, painting walls green and blue, for instance, like this vision in the Stumbox, or I don't know.
I know from the virtual reality research that was done on those cattle in lairage, they were showing bright green fields and green horizons, and those animals performed a lot better from a production point of view. So yeah, possibly, you know, if it's trying to get the right shade of green, and obviously some animals don't like bright colors then either, but it's to get the right shade of green that would resemble a green pasture, and not cause them sort of any anxiety or balking. But it probably, yeah, it's an interesting area, but probably would need a bit of extra work, additional work, I would think. But certainly, if you look at virtual reality headsets, it's working in that context. So it has potential, I would think.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kevin. It's just obviously, I think a lot of things we want to do is to look at, you know, just extra bits here, there, and everywhere along that whole process.
Yeah, but you're right. You're right, because you're thinking outside the box now. You're getting your thinking hat on. So you're thinking outside the box, which is good. That's good.
That's grand. No, thanks, Kevin. That's great. Thank you.
Great. If that's it, we might wrap it up. Just want to say thank you to everyone for attending the call today, and hope that you're enjoying Food Safety Week. Kevin, thank you for speaking on day 2. It means a lot to us. And I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, and things that we can improve on, and the things that we're doing well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks again for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What?